Namaskar. So just a quick overview on Shloka 11. I think we spent an entire class on it. So if you have the notes and you have the book and you have the recording, you don't need an overview. But still, the main things that we have to understand is a lot of times, a lot of commentators start teaching the Bhagavad Gita or start writing on the Bhagavad Gita from this verse. In fact, even Shankaracharya ji's actual commentary begins from this verse. So many people feel this is where the Bhagavad Gita starts from. But as we have seen and reiterated repeatedly, that without understanding a problem statement, there's no way we can deal with the solution. The solution is just lying without any consequence before us. So here is where Sri Krishna actually begins speaking. He's already spoken 2 verses before and 1 line in chapter 1. But this is where his teachings begin. And chapter 2 is the overview, what he will say from now right to the end of the of chapter 2 is just an overview of the rest of the Bhagavad Gita. So while you can, if you're an adept seeker and you are familiar with the subject, yes, you can do all the other texts and just do chapter 2. But if you're not familiar with Vedanta, you need to go through all chapters step by step. In chapter 11, we see Krishna directly addressing Arjuna's problem, and he says that, first of all, he addresses his grief, and he says, your grief is not at all validated over here for 2-3 reasons. He says, you've been grieving for those who should not be grieved over. We saw multiple reasons for this. One is that it is a natural process of life. The minute you are born, you are walking towards your death. So it's not that anybody will spare. Even the avatars that came onto this earth left the body. So it is common sense that you cannot grieve forever. Yes, you can feel the pain. Please understand, because in a lot of other classes, people say, oh, so we should not feel any pain when somebody dies. No, you should feel the pain, and it's not you should. If you are understanding spirituality properly, you will feel the pain very deeply, very, very deeply. But you will not be carried away. Rajesh ji explained the 2 arrows. One is the arrow that hits, the pain that is inevitable. But the second arrow is the one that is suffering, which is optional. How long do you want to keep, putting salt on those wounds is up to you. So that is what we saw. And the second reason we said is that wisdom is not something that is just we know in our head. Wisdom is something that we have assimilated and practiced in our lives. So while Arjuna has spoken so many different words, which he thinks are very wise, he doesn't understand the basic difference between what is real and unreal. And if you are a Vedanta student, you could have all the knowledges backward and forwards. But if you do not simply understand the difference between what endures after each life and what finishes here and what is even relatively not permanent, you don't have any wisdom. So this much you have to understand. Nitya, anitya, viveka, vichara. That is jnana. If you have that viveka, you are wise and you will lead your life accordingly. So that is what we saw. And Krishna categorically ends the verse by saying that nobody, even if it's your loved one or somebody somewhere else, nobody deserves suffering, grieving beyond the point. Not for anybody who is living, not for anybody who is dead. So what does that mean for us? Any changes that are happening in our life while we are alive, there is no need to suffer. Again, I'm going to keep changing the word grieve to suffer, because people understand you don't have to feel bad at all. No need to suffer for any changes that are happening during life, and absolutely no need to grieve when somebody passes over, because that is not an end. I'll end this with, death is not a full stop. It is a comma. And it is a full stop when you self-realize, but that is the greatest full stop that each and every individual jiva hopes for ultimately.
If you remember, we said the Bhagavad Gita start with the shloka Ashocyan and end with the shloka Ma Shuchaha. So this is the whole scope of the Bhagavad Gita. So the goal of the Bhagavad Gita is to transcend all our suffering. So this is one of the key points we need to keep in mind. And in the first shloka, what Krishna said is, Na anushocanti Panditāḥ. The word Pandita here means the one who knows who he is, the one who knows himself properly, the one who has realized his true identity, or a self-realized master. He doesn't anushojanti. That is very important. That his sorrow will not get into suffering. So what is the ask here? Suppose you wanted to get out of your sorrow, what should I do? Get self-realized. Know yourself. This is the first message of the Bhagavad Gita. And then he made one more comment. Ashocyan annashocastam prajnavadam subhashase. You're grieving. At the same time, you're speaking like a man of wisdom. These doesn't go together. Now that can raise a confusion in our mind. That can raise a confusion. Because is Krishna saying that you should not be grieving for anyone? Why is he saying that you should not be grieving for anyone? And to be very specific, he said, Gatasun agatasumscha. Meaning a Pandita doesn't grieve for somebody who is going, meaning dying, or somebody who is living. So death considered to be the greatest sorrow of all of our suffering, all of our pain. Why? That can raise some confusion in our mind. And that is exactly what the next shloka is going to answer. And Sanjay, I don't mean like, sorry to put you on the hook on them dynamically. Could you please chant the shloka 12 if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadhipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamatah param.
This is the shloka. So let's try to see the meaning of the shloka, and then we will try to see the deeper. Na tu eva aham ja tu nasam natvam neme janatipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamata. This is the shloka. What does that mean? Double negatives. That is what Krishna said. There was not a time I was not there. There was not a time you were not there. There was not a time these kings standing around us were not there. What does that mean? Double negative. In conventional language, double negative is not considered as a right usage. Right? You don't need to double negate anything. So he said, there was not a time I was not there. Look at the two negations. There was not a time I was not there. Two not. That is exactly what. And then he extends that. There was not a time when you were not there. Not just you and me. There was not a time when all of the people standing around here, or the entire humanity, was not there. Not just that. One more point. There will not be a time. There will not be a time where I cease to exist, or you cease to exist, or all these people cease to exist. Look at the double negatives on the past tense and the future tense. What does that mean? Everybody is eternal. That's all. That's all it means. That is the meaning of this shloka. So now connect this back to the previous shloka. Why the Pandita Gatasun Agatasumscha na Anishochanti Pandita? Why a wise person do not get into that prolonged sorrow, perpetual sorrow for those people who are passed away? Why death is not becoming a prolonged or a perpetual sorrow for the wise people. Because the wise know that death is not a permanent end of my being. Death is not a permanent end of your being. Or the death is not a permanent end of anything. Nothing in the world really come to a full stop. It's only changing from one form to the other. This is the implied meaning of the shloka. So can that be relatable? Why he said the wise do not have that perpetual sorrow? Because the wise knows what they know. They know that truly speaking, in my real essence, I am not destructible. I don't cease to exist, nor you, nor anybody, or anything. So death or the destruction is not a permanent negation. So in Vedanta or in the Vedantic vision, nothing comes to an end. Nothing comes to an end. So that is why the term we use for creation and destruction is pralaya and prabhava. Prabhava means praharshena bhava. So that is manifested. Something out of nothing is impossible. So whatever that comes is a manifestation. It's not a creation. If you remember, if you read Swami Vivekananda in his World Parliament of Religion, he presented a paper on Hinduism. In that paper, he said, creation, meaning only silly people can, only thinking people cannot accept creation. Something out of nothing is not logical. Right? Something out of nothing is not logical. So he said, I won't insult you by asking you to believe that the world was created one fine morning. He said, it is better to use a different term called the manifestation or projection. So this is the implied meaning of the shloka, but we need to deep dive into that. But this statement of Krishna, when he says, in my essence, I am permanent, I am eternal. Not just me. We think that Krishna is Bhagavan and he is eternal. Not just Krishna, but the entire humanity. Not just the humanity. The entire names and forms are eternal in their true essence. What does that mean? But I know myself. Like I'm changing constantly from one stage of my life to the other. And like, look, 100 years back, I was not there as Rajesh. And 100 years from now, 100% I won't be here as Rajesh. Or none of you would be here after 100 years. 100 years back, none of us was there. And 100 years from now, none of us would be there. So is Krishna is making some contradiction in his statement? That's what we wanted to see. So when Krishna said, something in us is permanent, eternal, and something in us is permanent. Now, the impermanent. The question is, when I say I, with what aspect of that personality I am getting identified? Am I identifying with the temporary aspect of mine, or am I identifying with the permanent aspect of mine? And the difference between a self-realized person and a normal human being is that the normal human being identifies himself or herself with that temporary me, whereas a self-realized master or a pandita or a sage, he or she will identify himself or herself with that permanent me. This is the difference. It's not very difficult. If you try to understand, it is not very difficult. And now let's take the example of Shankaracharya, the Swapna Drishtanta. In that Swapna Drishtanta, when I was in the dream, all of you might have had the dreams. In your dream, with whom you are identifying? Your dream body and the dream mind. Right? If you get sick in that dream, you think that, who is sick? I am sick. Isn't it? Right? If I get like $1 million, whom do you think got that money? I got that money. I get sick. I am happy. I am sad. All those identification happens with respect to the dream world. But we know for a fact that when the dream ended, what happened? Definitely the dream body is gone, the dream mind is gone, but I continue to exist. So what was my identification in that dream space and dream time? Yes, I had an identification, and that identification was very much needed for me to function in that dream space and dream time. But was that my complete identity? Was that my true identity? Or was that my, like, the full identity? Absolutely no. I identified myself with some limited aspect of myself. If I had known in the dream that I have a larger dimension of existence, if at all I get a problem in the dream, that problem would not bother me that much compared to if I limit my identity to that dream space and dream time. Isn't it? Otherwise, suppose I get sick in the dream, I would be really worried. Let's say that a person X was diagnosed by a terminal disease in the dream. Oh my God, he would have completely lost his mind. But suppose it was a lucid dream. If you know that it's a dream, still he is dreaming, the intensity of his suffering would have been totally different, because he know that my existence is not limited here in this dream. It is going to continue. So this shift in identity, instead of identifying with that small me in this time and space, I expand my identity beyond this space, beyond this time, and that is my true identity. And when I get into that true identity is not subjected to destruction, not subjected to change, and that identity will survive. And that is my true identity. And what Krishna is telling from Shloka 11 and 12 is, shift your identity from that lower I to that higher I. The lower I is completely determined by body, mind, and intellect, to the Atma. Because in the dream, I had the identity, and that identity was completely determined by the dream body, the dream mind, and the dream intellect. And when I was able to transcend that identity, I know that the dream body is temporary, dream mind is temporary, dream intellect is temporary, and they are not me. They are only the tools given to me to function in that dream space and dream time. So who is me? If I'm not the dream body, if I'm not the dream mind, if I'm not the dream intellect, who am I? Here is what the Vedanta tells me, that you are not body, you are not the mind, you are not the intellect. Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham. Right? Shankaracharya tells Manobuddhi Ahamkara Chitta Hinaham. I'm neither the body, nor the mind, nor the intellect. Then who am I? Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham. Hastamalakiyam, it is said, right? Exactly the same thing. Astamalaka, a devotee of Shankara, he was a small kid. It is the story, of course. This kid was not talking to anyone. So the parents was really worried, and Shankaracharya came there. So Shankara knew that this kid is something special. So Shankara was brought to this kid, and Shankara asked the kid, "Hey kid, who are you?" Kid started answering, "Naham manushyo nachadeva deksho, na brahmana kshatriya vaishya shudra." He said, "I am not a deva, I am not an asura, I am not a body, I am not a mind, I am not the prana, nothing." Then he said, Sanityoha, meaning he said, Sanityoha nitya swarupoham atma. I am consciousness. This is exactly what Hastama, the whole Hastamalagya Stotra is based on this. So who am I? What am I? If I think that I am Rajesh, 5 feet, 8-inch height, 150 pound weight, all this is my identity given to me by my body. And if I say that, okay, I'm a software professional or a management professional, that is governed by my intellectual skills, right? I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. That is determined by the emotional personality. So what happens is, in my current state of existence, my identity is determined by these composite factors, determined by the state of the body, identity with the body, the state of my mind, identity with mind, state of my intellect, or the skills of my intellect. Together it creates a identity in me, and that identity is known as Ahamkara, the sense of I-ness. So in my current sense of I-ness, who am I? Meaning, when I say I, that I is created with a compound entity, partially that is contributed by the body, partially that is contributed by the mind, partially that is contributed by the intellect, and partially that is contributed by the consciousness. So this composite entity is my I. And as long as you are stuck in that I, this world is suffering. It is going to have problems. It is going to have challenges. Even if you solve all the issues, someday you have to get out of this world. That is for sure. So what Krishna is saying is that Panditāḥ, the one who knows his true identity, they transcend this limited identity of body, mind, and intellect, and they transcend that to the consciousness. Now, what is this consciousness we are talking? But before that, let me give a pause and give opportunity for some time to cover this portion. But please try to understand this. If you understand this, the whole Vedanta is very simple.
So a few things here. You know, we are very quick to stand up and say a particular religion says their God is the best. Their God says, follow me. Their God says, you know, I'm the ultimate. And then there are people who turn back onto Hinduism and say, why are you blaming us? Look at your Bhagavad Gita. Not once, twice, repeatedly, Krishna has said, I am this. Come to me. You know, whoever comes to me, it's me, 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 me. So at the offset, I will keep reiterating this throughout our study, but at the offset, it's very important to understand any self-realized master, when they say I, it just means that they have dropped complete identification with the body, the mind, and the intellect, and they are fully identified with the self. That I, what Rajesh ji has been talking about, the big I. So right now, we are identified with our body. So we say, I am fat, I am thin, I am strong, I am weak, I am beautiful, I am whatever you want to say, because you're identified with the body fully. You could be very identified with your mind and your emotions. So I'm a very emotional person. Oh, I'm a very angry person. Oh, I don't like this. I like that. Again, a small identification with a small I. You go to your intellect. I believe this and this to be true. This is how it is. I am a West wing. I am a right wing, whatever else is going on right now around the world. Again, that's intellectual identification. The realized masters have no identification with whatever is going on with the body, the mind, and intellect. Does it mean they are not functioning? No, they are completely functioning. The biggest and the best example I can give is Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. He was suffering from the most advanced, most ravenous kind of a, throat cancer. He had no identification with what was going on with the body. Ramana Maharishi had a massive tumor in his elbow, which he got removed without anesthesia. So that is the level of disidentification with the body, mind, and intellect, and identification with the self. Here's a good time actually at this point to always keep next to you Swami Chinmayananda's BMI chart. It's something that will always keep reminding you that there is a separation between who you are, Atma, I, and the body, mind, and intellect. As long as we are identified with the body, mind, and intellect, which is going to bear the onslaughts from the world, we are ruined. Like Rajesh ji said in the last class, the only solution to all your problems are self-realization, identifying with the Atma. Why? Because the body, mind, intellect is going to be hit by the world. And the more you identify with that at any age, the more you're going to be continuously bothered, flustered, and completely devastated moment by moment. So that is something that we have to understand. I in the Bhagavad Gita, whenever Krishna says, is that highest I. Even here, when Krishna is saying you are always there, you were there, you will always be, is not, Radha ji or Rajesh ji or Rohit ji or Avanti. It is that we were there and we will always be there. This body, rest assured, when it dies in India in 4 hours, we burn it. It's finished. It's gone. It's not coming back. If any of you all are devotees of Shirdi Sai Baba, even in the Satcharita, he says that you all will come back. Yes, with the same people perhaps, but not in the same permutations and combinations. It's a staggering thought to think about, that somebody who is your husband can come back as your child. Somebody who's your watchman can come back as your father, depending on what karmic things you have with them. So it's quite, you have to sit with these thoughts to understand this subject very, very deeply. The dream analogy is perfect because it's very difficult to understand what is this I. So the dream analogy is completely, point on over here to understand this. When you are right now sitting over here, hopefully all of us are awake. We are all in Jagrit Avastha. We are all awake. Okay. So you say, I am awake. This entity is awake. Then now it's night in the US, you all will go to sleep. When you go to sleep, you say, I am asleep. You're having dreams in that sleep. That's the Swapna Avastha. And then you have a deep, deep sleep where you're not even aware, but you are able to get up in the morning and say, oh, I had a dreamless sleep. Oh, I had the best sleep in the night. Oh, I had a wonderful sleep. So what do you focus on? The I that persists, the I that says I am awake, the I that says I went to sleep and had a dream, good or bad, never mind. And the I that did not recognize anything in that state and had a very deep, restful sleep. So that I, when you keep focusing on, you will start understanding that through all these 3 states of consciousness, there is one thing that persists. And that I is who we are. Unless we contemplate on what we know, we are not going to understand what we do not know. Now, when we talk about the states of consciousness, as human beings, as people not on this, realized or whatever, we are only flitting and floating between these 3 states of consciousness. Awake, dream, sleep. Awake, dream, sleep. What are the sages and saints screaming, hollering? They're saying there is a 4th state, Turiya. Turiya means 4th. There is a 4th state. And actually, when you go to that 4th state, this entire Jagrut, Swapna, Sushupti will fold back into the dream exactly how we awake and we say, oh, it was a dream and we flit it off. So to think, what is that state? And then to say we are not aware of that state. No, we are aware because that state is what is witnessing. When we are awake, when we are dreaming, when we are sleeping. So continuously thinking about this. What I want to end with is, it's not easy. An acknowledgement. It's not easy to think that we are not all of this. For those people who watch a movie and get carried away, they know it's a movie. They know it's not real, but they will cry and cry and cry over it and get so identified that somebody is father has died and somebody's sister is something has happened and somebody's married and somebody's not married. In a movie, we are not able to hold ourselves back. We get so identified, forgetting it's a movie, it'll end. Some of us, when we dream, we have such terrible dreams, we are not able to drop it. We carry it on for days. Oh my God, what if it comes true? It was such a terrible dream. It was such a terrible dream. So our wisdom now will start from detaching in what is around us. Watch a movie, keep telling yourself it's a movie. When that movie finishes, if you tell yourself, you know what, life is also a movie, it's going to end. Behind that movie, what is playing, there's a white screen. In that movie, you have seen bloodshed, you have seen flood, you have seen, forest fires, you've seen all of it. But when that movie ends and you're still in the theater, everything goes off, it's a white screen. So when you understand the movie like that and you relate it to your life, you say, yes, in this life, I will see ups, I will see down, I will see devastation, I will see success, I will see all of that. But after this particular movie ends, that white screen that persists, that will go on, that will forever remain, that white screen am I. That I is what Krishna is talking about over here. Was always, the white screen was there before the movie started. A wonderful or horror or whatever movie played on that white screen, the movie ended and the white screen remained. So depending on, I like to make it very, very personal. Depending on our karmas and dharmas, all sorts of movies will play on this substratum of who we are. But when this particular movie ends, this life ends, that white screen will remain to either emerge a new story, depending on the storehouse of vasanas that we have, or we just merge into that white screen and there are no more movies. So this is how you relate it continuously to your life, and then you will start understanding this verse better and better.
Right. Now the question is, if I'm not the body, if I'm not the mind, if I'm not the conventional identity I think I am, right now I think there is always a self-perception. I think I am something, and what we are trying to do is expand that vision. So if you think, let's say that you are in a dream, you are suffering from like a terminal disease or something like that. Not you, somebody, because once I said this you, somebody got afraid. So let's use a third party, third person. If a third person is suffering from a terminal disease in a dream, for him, is coming to an end if he is identifying with the dream body and the dream mind. So suppose somebody in dream comes and tells you that you have your identity is not ending with this dream. It's hard for him to believe. But somehow, if you realize that, you know that, yeah, my dream body will end, but I have a continued existence. So what is that entity that survives my death? What is that entity in me which is not conditioned by time? And what is that entity that survives my current state of being as an individual in this place at this time? That is where the Vedanta comes and tell me that that is not material. And that is an X factor, let's call it. Because let's say that in mathematics, if you don't know a problem, how do you solve? Well, that is a simple arithmetic. You put a variable X, right? And right now, we don't know who it is, what it is. We know that theoretically, we were told that something is there which is going to survive your current space and time and current identity. So in Vedanta, that inquiry was started. What is that true identity in me? And all these investigations, if you really look at the Upanishads, you could see they were inquiring externally, they were inquiring internally, like there were several attempts. And in one of the Upanishads, it is beautifully said miserably failed. So there is a beautiful verse. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. With my organs of perception and action, I'm not able to find it out. And with my thinking also, I'm not able to find it out. But in between, during that inquiry, during the deep contemplation, this truth was revealed to certain sage. Shrunvanti Vishwa Amritasya Putra, that famous statement came in the Upanishad. Oh, listen, oh son of complete immortality. This is the word. Shrunvanti Vishwa Amritasya Putra. If you really look at Vivekananda's World's Parliament of Religion, he quotes this. Son of eternal beings. I found that true identity in me. And what is that identity? Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Aham, I is what? Chit. Chit means consciousness. So my true identity is not material. The true identity is consciousness. And that consciousness is what we call as Atma. When you think about Atma, don't think that there is some entity sitting inside me. No, that is not the true Atma. The word Atma literally means what? Myself. Self. That's all Atma means. It's not a complicated word. The word Atma means me, my true identity. And depending upon the context in Sanskrit language, Atma can mean body. Atma can mean with whom I'm identifying, that is the Atma. The mind can be Atma. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses Uttared Atman Atmanam. There it is, the Atma is body and mind. So Atma, the true Atma, is the consciousness. And the nature of that true Atma is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means that is the absolute existence. Chit means consciousness. Ananda means what is the nature of that me or true identity in me. Is contentment. It's not bliss, it is contentment. People use like it's a wrong translation to use bliss. Bliss means it's an experience which, depending upon something else, it will come and go. But this contentment, it is everlasting. So, once again, the true I is indestructible. It is not conditioned by time, and it is not conditioned by the longevity of my body and the mind. It is something beyond that. The people who knows this truth, they don't grieve. I mean, they don't get into perpetual sorrow because of death, because they know that the true identity in you is not coming to an end. And what is that true identity in me? It is the Atma. When I say Atma, that is consciousness. That much is what is established. But now there is another problem. The word consciousness is also confusing because the word consciousness has different meaning in neuroscience and in Vedanta. So when we try to, when you most of the times you are heard about the meaning of consciousness from the neuroscience perspective or from the psychological perspective. And when you try to substitute that meaning of consciousness into Vedanta, that can create confusion. So we need to understand in Vedanta, when we say what is consciousness, it has a totally different meaning. So the difference is in the book, we have given a chart, what science talks and what Vedanta talks. There is a big chart. So in the definition of neuroscience, consciousness is a property of your brain. It's an attribute of your human brain. That is how they present it. But in Vedanta, consciousness is absolutely not an attribute of the brain. The consciousness is that awareness, that which makes you aware of everything else. Let's say that you are aware of the world, you are aware of your feeling, you are aware of your thoughts. That which gives that awareness in you, that is consciousness. This is the definition of Vedanta. So biggest difference is science sees the consciousness as an attribute of the body or the brain, and Vedanta's definition of consciousness, because they both means two different things, and unfortunately we uses the same name. That is why this confusion happens. So now the science still, most of the scientists still believe that the consciousness is an attribute of the human brain. But it is very interesting to see that nowadays there are scientists who started thinking the otherwise, like right from the beginning. I think all of you know Erwin Schrödinger. Erwin Schrödinger is obviously the father of the quantum mechanics. So if you really look at the physics, obviously there was the classical physics of Newton. And from the classical physics, what happened? The two other branches of physics came out. One is the theory of relativity, second one is the quantum mechanics. In physics, what they typically do is they create a model, and with that model, can you explain the observed phenomena? That is the whole idea of science. That is how the science works. You create a mathematical model, and through that mathematical model, can you explain all the use cases that are happening in the world? Is that works? This is the same principle in AI, right? So when you say that, suppose you are creating a machine learning algorithm, it looks at the observed facts and try to fit that with a mathematical model. So there are two models. One is quantum mechanics and the other one is theory of relativity. Theory of relativity explains all the macro bodies very well, and the quantum mechanics explains all the micro world very well. And this quantum mechanics is considered as one of the big breakthrough in the history of physics. And this was led by this famous scientist called Erwin Schrödinger. This Erwin Schrödinger was a big ardent fan of the Vedanta vision. So he wrote a book called What is Life? It's available in the internet, you can download. He studied Vedanta from loose English translations. It's not even the perfect translation. And even with that, he was fascinated. And one of his famous statement was, I regard like the consciousness as the most fundamental. He believed that matter is a derivative of the consciousness. He considered the human consciousness as the most fundamental aspect, and it is not a property of the body, mind, and intellect. Why I am saying is that this is not just said by the rishis. This is said by the scientists also. Now, the second scientist is Max Planck. Have you heard of Max Planck? Very famous scientist. He also echoed this Schrödinger's vision. Matter is a derivative of the consciousness. His famous statement is, I regard consciousness as the fundamental entity. Forget all that. From the physics, now in the modern psychology and modern neuropsychology, Dr. J. David Chalmers, who is a professor in Columbia here in New York, he came up with the hard problem of human consciousness. Hard problem of human consciousness. You can just Google it and you will see, because no scientist in the world up until now is able to explain how the functioning of the brain can create subjective experiences. See, the AI can do almost everything in the world right now. It can self-drive a car, it can open a door for you, it can do and seeing the AI development that are coming, it is unbelievable. But none of the AI system has subjective experience, which we have. And that subjective experience is not explainable by any of the scientists. And this problem is known as the hard problem of consciousness. Nobody was able to solve. And there is a lot of debates that are happening on this topic right now. This professor is conducting a lot of seminars here in this area, like New York, New Jersey. So you can Google it, you can go to YouTube and listen to his talks. So this is a very famous, and you can see more and more researches are coming. So it's not far, these things will come and proven sometimes. So this is consciousness. But now what we are going to do is we are going to understand what is the nature of this consciousness, right? How to understand this consciousness. When you say consciousness, that is the Atma. Atma means me. Don't just remove the mysticism from these terms. Because a lot of people think that Atma is some entity sitting in me and that is transmigrating. That is not the Atma. That is only the Sukshma Sharira. We are going to see all those things later. Atma is not the one who is reincarnating. Atma is the true self in you. That is the consciousness in you. And we are going to take a deep dive into that. In the next few shlokas, Krishna is going to jump into the nature of the consciousness. In fact, he is going to approach this from 6 different angles. He is going to explain, because it is very difficult to explain, but he is going to explain this through 6 different angles. And through that 6 different angles, you will get a good picture of who am I, what am I. So this is the upcoming shlokas. So let me pause here. I think we exceeded the time. Avanti, you want to add any additional talk about this consciousness?
So I'll just going back to the book. If you have the book in front of you, page number 103 to page number 106. That is your homework. It has to be your homework, because whatever Rajeshji has said, if you don't read it yourself, which there's been a lot of effort into this, the difference between consciousness and what we are going to be talking, it will be very confusing going forward, especially the table which he has so meticulously put together on page number 106 of the book. Please revise it before your next class, because once we start splitting what is consciousness, what is Atma, what is going to go reincarnate, you have to have this properly in your head. I think a lot of you are in the US, so consciousness is understood very different in your context. So you need to go through these things. Now, just going back to the dream scenario that we've been talking about, we like to keep harping over this because that is the only way that you all can start going to the peripheries of what actually the truth is, who we are. So that's why we keep relating our mortal existence to a dream. And then when we wake up, that dream is gone. So just sit with that. Now, suppose if you, in your dream, you're dreaming and you are dreaming that you are a beggar, that you're dying for food, you have no food to eat, you have no water to drink, you are so poor, you're going from house to house to house to house begging. And a lot of dreams translate into bodily experiences. I know I've had quite a few nightmares, especially growing up, where I've gotten up with heart palpitations, sweating. I don't know if any of you all have experienced that. It's so real when you are in your dream. It's so real. And you're experiencing the stomach pain because you are hungry in your dream. You're a beggar. And then suddenly you wake up, or somebody wakes you up and you're crying in your dream, and you wake up and you're lying in this plush silk bed in a beautiful mansion. And your stomach is still paining. But guess why? Because you've overeaten at a party that you've just come from. And that is why your stomach is paining. That same stomach pain in your dream, you're thinking that it is out of hunger. So as soon as you wake up, that dream you laugh at. You're like, oh my God, my stomach is paining because I've overeaten, not because I was hungry. And you throw it away. This is what the sages say happened to us when we wake up into the 4th state of consciousness, which is Tulya. This entire dream, I think in one of the Buddhist books, not the main Dhammapada, but one of that says that once you realize who you are, you look up at the sky and start laughing loudly. What all have you been investing in and what all you've been going up and down about? Now, I want to quote again King Janaka. There's a very, very famous thing that, really highlights this analogy. So I've spoken about King Janaka a few times. This is where that whole thing of relating dreams to life comes into picture. So he had a dream one night, and the exact thing I'll read from to you. So one night in his palace, he dreamed he was a beggar suffering from penury and starvation. He woke up terrified. King Janaka also, who was such a sage, he woke up terrified because the dream felt so real. Immediately summoning the wise men of his kingdom, he posed this question to them. What was his question? Very famous question. If you're in the spiritual lobbies, if you're studying Vedanta, this is the life-changing question. He posed this question to the wise men. Am I King Janaka who dreamt that I was a beggar? Or am I a beggar now dreaming that I am a king? None of those wise men could answer it. There comes in Ashtavakra, his guru and his guide. He came in and he posed the same question. And what was Ashtavakra's answer? Sage Ashtavakra gave the answer. You are neither the king nor are you the beggar. You are the self. And for a person like Janaka, who was already so evolved, this understanding just fit like a glove, like a hand fits a glove, the perfect glove. And that is what we have to keep thinking, that we are through our day, we are dreaming, we are sleeping, we are awake, we're going through all these experiences. None of it is real. We are the self. One last thing I'd like to say is, when Krishna, just meditate on this a little bit, when he's saying things like, he says, you and me are the same. We all know Krishna is Swayam Narayana standing next to Arjuna. And yet he's had the humility to say that I was never indeed was I not, nor you, nor these rulers of men. Also, none of us will cease to exist. He's brought himself down. He's watered himself down to everybody else, to all of us. We're all the same. That's what he's saying very categorically. So here is where you have to understand this. Please understand this right at the offset. Our bodies are different. You look different. I look different. Our minds are different. You feel different emotions. You care about different things. I feel different emotions. I care about different things. Our thoughts are different. You are wiser than I am. I mean, more intelligent than I am. I may be intelligent in other things. All these things differ. But the quantum, the quality, and the amount of Atma within each of us, between King Janaka and a beggar actually in Dharavi, is absolutely the same. There is no difference. Then you'll say, if it is the same, why are some people evolved and why are some people not evolved? That answer comes in chapter 3 of how we are, that Atma is covered with all our desires, our vasanas. The more and more our body, our mind, our intellect, our identification, all of that, the more and more you're able to disidentify, the more the same quantum of Atma shines through. With that same quantum of Atma, you can be a Ramakrishna Paramhamsa or you can be a terrorist. So the quantum of Atma is the same. It is what covers that Atma, which is so beautifully. Chapter 3 is one of my most famous most favorite chapters over here. We'll explain in the next chapter of how we can separate. We can elevate ourselves from being that sinner to being that sage.
Very good. So recap. The previous shloka said the solution for all the problem is self-realization. And self-realized people were called as Pandita. And he said that the Panditas won't, nothing in the world can shake the Pandita, even the death. So why? That question is answered in the shloka, because Pandita knows that, truly speaking, none of us are impermanent, meaning impermanent. We are all, in our true essence, we are eternal, and death is not an end of our existence. That's it. Now the next question is, if there is a case, why do I feel happy and sad? That is beautifully answered in the next shloka.